So let's continue that conversation a little bit before we move on to the next subject. So my question to you all, especially you, Katz, is, as I introduced at the beginning of your question, the World Bank estimates like more than 300 billion US dollars that would cost if we do not, act, in advance in terms of, responding or preparing for the climate change. So when I saw that, I thought that was the social cost that we just talked about at the beginning of the discussion, but also I think that that is also an opportunity for a lot of business people as well, right? Because if we don't do anything, that will cost that $300 billion, but if we invest like $200 billion now, maybe then we can save that $300 billion per year, but that $200 billion is a business opportunity for somebody else, right? So I just want to get your perspective from the government, from Europe, and also from the academia, how the businesses can judge that. And it's a risk, and it's sometimes, judgment in investment, but Katsu, can you start with your company? How you invested based on the competition, but do you see more of those kind of business opportunities by investing more money into those issues? Yeah? Oh. No, actually, this is an additional question. So, yeah. So, can you answer that just without slides? Just use the microphone. Yeah.
Yes. In our company, we have various kinds of committees. Mm-hmm. For example, environmental committee or new technology committee, technical committee, or human resources committee. Mm-hmm. The president is the CEO is in charge of the top level of management, but the second layer, we have like a working committee. We raised the subject by discussing the subject with the divisions, mm-hmm. and then if it is important, we raise the idea to the upper management, mm-hmm. and it's also our company is very free to talk.
Okay. So it's very open communication internally within
For example,
your company.
I had a smart community project with Yokohama City, mm-hmm. and at the time we don't have much experience and no experience. So I directly talked to the CEO. Mm-hmm. I want to do this.
Okay.
Pay me $2 million. He paid.
Really?
Because competitors. We are far behind. So yeah. We need to catch up him and the other company. So that's a very easy.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, I mean, you have that culture internally, so you don't have to really challenge yourself to achieve that. But a lot of companies in Korea, as well as in the United States, actually, not many companies have that kind of open communication, maybe, and again, I just want to set an example for the audience how they can become that leader, not follower, and how they can grab this business opportunity. Although we have this gloomy climate change, I mean, somebody will have that opportunity. So again, do you have any perspective from academia side how you train your students to be that leader?
Well, I do have some thoughts. I think the real opportunity here is to think transformationally. To think far beyond, let's just improve incrementally, let's become a little bit more efficient, mm-hmm. but to think instead completely differently about how you might do things. And I've been sitting here trying to think of a good example mm-hmm. as you spoke, and I'm not sure I have a good one, but I have one. And I was thinking about the idea, I'm going to speak in a minute about some of the practices in the U.S. that are going on for companies that are trying to improve their climate performance. And one of the things companies are focusing on is fuel efficiency of their equipment. And my thought is this: that is something that we need to do from a greenhouse gas standpoint. We need to use our heavy equipment more efficiently. We need to be aware of the amount of effort we're getting for each gallon of fuel expended. But it's also very much an economic decision. And if you're able to simultaneously pursue the objectives of minimizing fuel use and reducing greenhouse gases, that's going to show up as a positive on your bottom line. And I think in order to get the ball rolling, in order to get the ideas going, you need to look for opportunities where you have an intersection of cost savings with an improvement in climate performance. And so fuel efficiency is one of those. It's something you would want to do anyway, that you could make the business case for. But then by positioning it as a climate change improvement, you can get double credit for it, basically.
And Kevin, also government is not a for-profit business, but also government is run by a limited budget, of course, and you have to make your business decisions how you spend that money. And resilience, again, like this kind of social and environmental cost, going back to that theme again. So how does that affect how government is run, and also when you see this resiliency, especially that issue, how would the government make the decisions on those?
Well, if you don't mind, I'm going to answer your first question first.
Okay.
About business opportunities, because I think if you certainly look at most countries, there are enough businesses in the marketplace today to do all the work that needs to be done. So it isn't like all of a sudden there's going to be more work and so you can start a new company. So the big opportunity is to be able to differentiate yourself from your competitors in ways that we have a good example sitting on the stage with us. But I think that there are many ways to do that. One is to really understand in a deep way and be able to communicate that to the clients, that this is what I can deliver to you that's different from the other marketplace. Not every client will buy it at first, but I think in the long run that's going to be an important thing. And the second major thing is to develop alliances with other kinds of companies that are in related fields. So if you're in the architecture business and you don't have a couple of friends who are in the engineering business, then you're going to be disadvantaged in the marketplace. And similarly, to line up with construction firms and all across the way. I think from the government's point of view, we do actually manage everything in real estate exactly as any other real estate owner does, with one major exception. We hold on to the property for a long time. So it enables us to make life cycle cost decisions, which we do. In fact, we're required to by law. And making life cycle cost decisions is, as you pointed out with regulations, it's more work, but you get a better answer. And so the willingness to make life cycle cost decisions enables you to think, but again, I would also add, we are very limited by the first cost dilemma. So we have a fixed budget and a first cost. And when we come to some of the examples that I have in the slides, I have ways that companies and clients have gotten around that first cost dilemma and gotten to good life cycle decisions. And as I pointed out, they don't have to cost more as long as you are capable of systems thinking. And when I say systems thinking, I don't mean within one little system like heating and ventilation, but all of the systems of the building working together in the context of the community, in the context of the country, in the context of the world.
Mm-hmm. Well, actually, I'm thrilled with your last sentence. That integration with the context of the world, right? That's how I see. The country has this problem with is this integration, working together kind of concept, because there are a lot of entities and researchers and policymakers in this country, and they're all trying to doing good, okay? But the problem is more like there are individual players, and there's no kind of integrated body or someone who can actually integrate those bodies into one. So that's why I'm thrilled with your comment that I think I'm challenging the audience again, if you can influence the policies and how we do our businesses and policies, just try to that integration. That is very inspirational, I think, for this audience as well. During the break, also, there was a request from the audience that they want to hear a little bit more about the situation in the developing countries, not these advanced countries, because Korea is kind of in the bridge between well-developed countries versus developing countries. We just got out of that developing country a few not long ago. So I mean, you can go back to resilience, you can go back to low carbon economy that we talked about, but can you help this audience understand how the developing countries can handle this climate change issue? I mean, if they're more vulnerable, they don't have more infrastructure, but what kind of opportunities do they have that they can learn the lessons from us?
Yeah, just to start with, I think they shouldn't make the same mistakes we made first. But there is, of course, if you look at developing countries, there are two stories. You see one big development to make bigger cities, also in developing countries, so that people move from the rural areas to cities, which is a huge problem. And well, I have no answer. Perhaps Kevin have an answer on that. But on the rural part, I should say, don't make our mistakes. Decentralized, don't build very intensive grids, but try to find self-sustainable communities and develop them to be as sustainable as possible. And don't rely too much sometimes on traditional techniques our big companies sometimes offer. I know of a project I think in Egypt, where there was an idea to make a water cleaning technique on local basis available with modern biological techniques, which saves a lot of energy. You don't have to pump the water over hundreds of kilometers and clean it in a central place. Even the United Nations supported that. But it was not done because the big cement industry wanted to build these big systems. So it's not that easy to say, don't make our mistakes, but I think the first I should advise, try to solve it locally in the rural area where possible. Make mini grids for electricity, as you did, of course, also for the mobile phone, and don't put too much infrastructure in the ground which is not needed.
Mm-hmm.
So I think you highlighted an opportunity in many cases in the developing countries. The absence of a early 20th century infrastructure is an incredible opportunity. And I would absolutely concur, don't repeat the mistakes. A good mix of centralization and decentralization is not that difficult to imagine and much easier to implement over time. If you think about, if you have what seems like a mammoth problem in a country, a decentralized approach enables you to start small and link together later, but solve local problems, and simple solutions are very often the superior solutions. I mentioned before that buildings that were built 100 years ago in our inventory are actually more efficient than the ones that were built 20 years ago, because the buildings were designed before air conditioning was normal. And so they were designed to be habitable without air conditioning and with very minimal heat. And at that time, lighting was extremely expensive. In fact, lighting didn't become cheap until the fluorescent tube was invented in the mid-40s. And so going back to maximizing the naturally available resources and minimizing sort of the supplied resources is really an opportunity. And I think that a healthy skepticism of big money solutions is really important. And since most people don't have big money, it should be a skepticism that is easier to adopt. But it's so easy to look at a developed country and say, I want that. And to think that if we started over from scratch, we would actually end up where we are. And where we are today is a series of compromises made over 100 years that may or may not have been the right compromises as we look backwards. In some cases, clearly not.
Good. Any more comments about this issue in the developing countries?
Well, your comment, Kevin, about the cost of these systems, I think they are more affordable if you have the stakeholders actually trying to muster the funds together to construct them. But a lot of the infrastructure investments in developing countries have historically come in big chunks from external investors. And I imagine that's a big barrier to the kind of approaches we're advocating. And I wonder how that barrier could be overcome.
Well, it seems like we don't have that clear solution for the developing countries, but at least we challenge them. And I know there are a lot of smart people in the audience. I know some of the construction companies sent their staff here as well. So when you actually look at the global market, especially the third world and third countries, also I want to encourage you to think a little bit differently. So it's not like, we've done building the roads, we've done building the power plants, so we want to build that same thing in this country. If you go to that country with that kind of mindset, I don't think that's going to help that country at all. So just like we said, just present your idea with, we've made these mistakes in our country, and that's why we are suffering with this, and we have that experience going through all these mistakes, but this is, I think, what you should build, new way. And if you present your business to those countries, I think you have much more chance to get businesses there. That's my just 2 cents. I might be wrong, but all right. So let's get back to our agenda. Now our theme 3 and 4. We're going to talk about reactions and actual work that companies do to address this climate change. So starting with Kevin, so you hire architects and engineering firms as well as construction companies as an owner. And we already touched this a little bit, but what is GSA's role is specifically creating a new market that can advance the industry towards the low carbon economy, and such as hiring process and procurement process, as well as developing new compliances and things like that. So can you give us those examples?
Well, I think we buy things. 93% of everything we do through a contract with somebody else. So changing the contracts is really important. And I have some, because I'm in the building business, I figured I should bring some pictures of buildings along. Each one of these examples has a very specific theme, which I left on my chair, but I will remember them. This is a building in Portland, Oregon, which is a relatively mild climate. The original building is seen on the left, and the replacement building, which is just a renovation, it's not a completely replacement, although it looks completely different, is on the right. What I like about this is remembering the simple things. So the architects and engineers noticed that in Portland, Oregon, which is, I might say, exactly the same thing as here in Korea, as well as in Tokyo, as well as in the Netherlands or in Brussels, and even in North Carolina, the sun rises in the east, travels across the southern sky, and sets in the west. So maybe the four sides of the building should not be identical because they have to interact with the environment in a different way. So, next slide. So the solution, which you see here, has four different sides of the building. They managed to change everything in the building. We started out with a facade replacement, and they said, well, actually, if you let us change everything, we can do everything at the same cost as your facade replacement. And if you let us move everybody out of the building, we can actually save you a year of construction time, which is, of course, a huge cost savings. So they switched from an air-based system for distributing heat and cool to a radiant system in the building. They put on a completely new facade, which no longer leaks both air and water. And between those two things, plus making programmable elevators, they saved enough floor space to be the equivalent of 2 additional floors. And so this is an example of every system has a consequence for every other system. So when you ask the engineer, how did you decide on the shading system on the western facade? The engineer asked, that's not a shading system. It's an integral part of the mechanical system of the building. If it doesn't exist exactly that way, they did over 30 energy models because they didn't use the energy model to model the energy. They used the energy model to make decisions about how the building would proceed. So the theme is systems thinking. And the next building, these are more pictures of the interior, the radical change in the daylight. And in the lobby, which you see on the left, every single person who worked on the building, the cleaners, the masons, the ditch diggers, and the architects and the engineer, every single person's name is engraved in the lobby. So that you can see, I had a part of this building. And that makes the kind of connection that everybody then contributes to the building, if you know that's the result. Next. So this building is in Grand Junction, Colorado. It was, again, a renovation which was not designed to be net zero. The project team renovated this building to net zero with no increase in budget at all, by changing the design to, let's show the next slide. And here you see just how, what in bad shape it was when we started. What you see on this slide is you see the solar array on the roof. Because it's a historic building, we cannot show the solar array, so it's hidden, but it's up there next. And again, a radical change in the interior, increasing the use of daylight, variable refrigerant flow in the systems, ground source heat pump with the earth exchange to reduce the overall energy consumption. They reduced the energy consumption in the building by 5-fold. It's 1/5 the energy consumption as it was when it started. Next. And it's a really a great success. This building is also net zero at no capital cost to the government because we used an energy savings performance contract. Now, it is also true that it's on an island in the Caribbean, and even though the weather is nice, the electricity is extremely expensive. It's 45 cents a kilowatt hour there. But we were able to do, on 17 years of energy savings, a complete net zero building, powered mostly by solar. And it really emphasizes the fact that there is no one technological solution that gets you to net zero. It's multiple different technologies, and they're all well known. There's nothing new or radical in here. It's improving the switchgear, insulating the exterior of the building, changing the tenant behavior so that they use fewer devices or make sure that they're turned off at night, and changing the default conditions so the building operates the way it should with lots of human override. Next. And the last one is back to your original question on the procurement. I think that the brilliant thing about this design, this is also a net zero building, is that the brilliant thing is actually the procurement, because this building was built by a simple idea. Here's the budget. You can't go over the budget no matter what. Here's the things that you must deliver. It has to be big enough to serve the program. And then here's a list of 18 items that we really want. Number 18 was net zero. And they awarded the contract to the team that would commit to the most of those 18 extra items. The team that, and you had to commit to the point of you put your fee at risk to delivering it. Wow. And the fee was larger. This building was built on time, on budget, because that was a requirement of the contract. They achieved all 18 special items and earned 100% of the fee only 2 years after delivery, because the fee is only earned in actual performance of the building. The building is not anything extraordinary, again, except, of course, in the integration of everything to achieve this net zero goal. These contractual provisions flowed from us as the owner to the principal contractor, who shared them with the architect, the engineer, and every subcontractor. So the fee flowed all the way down to every subcontractor, and they all had to earn the fee as they went on. And it was built with not one single change order. Not one single change order.
Wow.
Next. And I think the last one, this is another set of pictures of the area for that. The last one is a building that was constructed by the National Aeronautics and Space Administration to demonstrate that what they learned on the space station could actually be applied to the Earth. It is almost net zero. It could be net zero. It might be net zero sometime in the future, but at the moment it's running off of a fuel cell, which is from natural gas, which can't quite count as net zero. But again, it takes into account the weather, the movement of the wind. It's all of the. It's completely naturally ventilated. So that the main thing here was, apply that technology of a sealed environment to an unsealed environment, and you can actually do that. I don't think this is the cheapest building that the federal government has ever done. And the reason I don't think that is because I can't find out how much it actually costs. And if it were a good cost, it would be easy to find out. So all of these are sort of ideas on how to, and I think the overarching theme is everything has to be integrated from the very beginning of the work as the owner all the way to operation and maintenance of the facility. And if you don't earn your fee for 2 years, you know that you're going to keep the building operator in the loop, because if he doesn't operate it or she doesn't operate it the way it was designed, you won't earn your fee. And I think that transition is a huge problem that we're beginning to address.
Wow. Very impressive. And actually, I didn't know U.S. government had that kind of bold leadership to, build these kind of exemplary projects, and so which is very good. So, any comments on his his answer and presentation. Any questions for Kevin?
Yes, a great presentation and great examples. There is always this discussion when we talk about net zero, nearly zero, zero energy buildings. Of course, what the definition of zero is, and perhaps you could say that in a few words. And we in Europe, we also discuss this issue, and we say, well, you can speak about zero energy buildings, but you should also add a layer under it to say that at least the thermal performance of the building should meet a certain requirement, and the system should meet a certain requirements, and the indoor environmental quality should at least meet a certain requirement level.
Well, I agree completely with the requirements. All of these buildings have to meet not only the minimum standards, but 30% better than the minimum standards for energy. They all exceed that. We have not strict enough requirements for the indoor environment because we don't really know enough about it. We are going towards much more, now that sensor technology has become much less expensive, we're monitoring the indoor environment more. We have pretty good environmental requirements for ventilating air. All of the buildings mentioned have separation of heating and ventilating air to two different systems, which enables you not only to reduce energy, but to be more responsive to the human needs of the building. And then it gets to the definition. The simple definition is these buildings are all defined the way we mostly do, which is that during the course of 1 year, the amount of energy consumed is less than or equal to the amount of energy produced on site. Some of them measure the energy at the source as well. So, and the difference is not much, but it's about 6 or 7% for transmission and distribution losses. So for us, we take into account the transmission and distribution. So the consumed part, the bought, comes from the source, and then the site production. That's why I said this building here is not really net zero, because even though because they're also they're bringing in the natural gas and consuming it there. It's not a renewable resource completely. It's designed to take landfill gas, and then you get into a more difficult question. My personal belief, not the belief of the U.S. government, is that you shouldn't burn anything.
Mm-hmm. Yes, but biofuels are considered to be part of the equations.
Yes, I know.
Yeah,
I just don't happen to personally agree with
that. Yeah. And, well, perhaps if you permit me to say the word standards again, all the technologies you just mentioned, they are included.
Yes.
So we looked at all these, well, you could say, quite innovative technologies, the hydronic systems, the radiant systems. As well, nice to say to this audience that the standard on radiant systems is developed under the responsibility of Korea. So the chair of Working Group 9 is Professor Kim.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, Kaz, if you don't mind, let me extend this question for you, because we've heard a lot about U.S. government's roles and leadership, but I know you're in practice in a private company, but can you highlight a little bit of kind of leadership that you've observed by the Japanese government? Just talk, yeah.
Yes, Japanese, Japanese government set the target of ZEV, and the public buildings have to be ZEV by 2020, net ZEV. and private new buildings have to be ZEV by 2030. But at the time, no definition on ZEV. Net ZEV, it was net ZEV. But after that, there's a new definition. There are three categories. The one is the ZEV ready, 50% only and by energy conservation. There's 75% by energy conservation and renewable energy at the site. The net ZEV is 100% by energy conservation design and renewable energy. So, otherwise, private company that is not able to. They are not able to invest the money if it's too expensive for us to build.
Okay. Well, that's kind of an answer that we talked about at the beginning, but that's reality, by the way. I mean, I'm not trying to sugarcoat, our future. I mean, our reality is, yes, we have this challenge. Even, Kazuyuki's company is one of the leading company, and still he has to say that. So, and I know this is also a challenge that you face a lot every day. But hopefully, so you're not the only country and you're not the only one here. So don't get too disappointed or discouraged by that fact. And we all try to overcome this. And again, like as an integrated world, I think that's why we have to change our mindset of seeing the cost that we look at, right? So, well, let's move on. Next question is for you, actually, both of you, Annie and Yap. Kind of similar question, so I want to just move to European companies and also, if you know some U.S. companies who take those leadership in construction. And I think from the private sector perspective, for me, when I try to do new things, always it hits my mind saying, hey, well, if I do this, and I really want to invest my staff time in, researching a new technology or new design techniques, but I don't mind doing it, but then would that really increase my market share? Would that increase my opportunity to get more projects and more opportunities? And it's always risk and judgment, and also I got to foresee this market as well, and I don't want to be too maybe advanced, or I want to be behind people. So finding that market niche is kind of very challenging for a business person like me. So do you have examples of those kind of companies who's been very successful in increasing their market share by doing those innovative things addressing climate change issues? So, Lenny, you want to go first?
Sure. So I think actually what we've been talking about with regard to the U.S. government informs all this. So I'm not going to talk about any companies by name.
Okay.
But what I want to start by saying that when the biggest owner in a country makes the kind of strides that the U.S. government is making and declares that these things are of value in choosing and procuring contractors for work, that really sets the stage for companies that are willing to go out there and do it. So I think policy plays a huge role in pulling the market, and I salute what the U.S. government has done there. And I think you're seeing as a result, this is a recent study commissioned by the U.S. Green Building Council in 2015. We're seeing that green building is outpacing conventional construction growth. I don't have the specific numbers, but it's definitely taking a majority share of new construction in the U.S. From the standpoint of what construction firms are doing, there are a lot of efforts that are being taken to optimize process. Some of the things you've heard us talk about, actually, could you go back to the previous slide? So we have people looking at sustainability and choosing methods, ground improvement methods, and new ways to calculate the carbon footprint of different ways. You've got carbon footprint status tracking. These are practices that companies are doing. And equipment selection and fuel optimization. We've got green supply chain. All of these things are happening now. Site operations. These are becoming more common practices. And among the leading firms in the U.S., you're seeing these pretty much as a standard. for people that benchmark against each other. So this is expected. We're also seeing major firms expand, the construction firms expanding just from focusing on the construction phase to being involved in these integrated teams that you've heard Kevin talk about. Not just design build, but design build, operate, maintain. And when you have a contract to provide for the entire life cycle of a building or a facility or a large portion of it, you have a serious stake in how that facility performs because your profit is based on it performing efficiently to meet the owner's requirements. So I would say there are a lot of technological and process improvements that you can do, but in a lot of ways that contract structure and the way you frame the problem and the services you deliver to the owner will make a huge difference in your ability to deliver on all this. If you go to the next slide, we've heard a lot today about net zero, net Z buildings, and I think it's noble that a lot of policies are pushing us toward that. But my personal belief is that incremental changes are not necessarily going to be enough to get us where we need to go. It's maybe a little bit like trying to lose weight on a diet by counting calories, and instead you've got to think more transformationally about what your targets are. And I would argue that we need to think not just net zero, but net positive. Living buildings in the U.S. That actually provide resources and that help support the environmental loads imposed by other buildings around them. That's where I see all this heading. And I think we need to think bigger. It's not just about making small efficiency improvements. It's thinking from a systems standpoint. We want the building up there on the right to behave like the building on the left. And in fact, that's what it was modeled after. So we're really going for something regenerative. And that's what I think our targets need to be.
Okay. Well, before moving on to Yap's on the same question, so you are from the academic side, and I know that there are several college and university professors in the audience, as well as students. So we talked about this new market, like the whole life cycle service from the planning to all the way to operations and maintenance as a business model, right? So how should they train their students for that new market? And as a professor at your college, how do you do that?
Ooh, that's a tough question. That's a tough question. I think the single most important thing, and we're working really hard to do this at Virginia Tech, is to teach different disciplines to be able to speak the language of the other. I believe Kevin mentioned that earlier. It's not necessarily about creating professionals that can do everything. It's no longer the age of the master builder. Our buildings are too complex for that. But instead, what we need to understand is what are the roles played by the other stakeholders. So we need our architects to be able to work with our engineers, to work with our constructors. And at Virginia Tech, in our studios, we're doing that. We're putting them together on projects, and they're developing solutions in the kinds of roles that they will play in real projects. And in addition to that, one of the things that I think is particularly important is that they understand how to talk to lay people as well. Right? So building occupants, community stakeholders. I require my students to be part of programming for some of the design build projects that we do for our class, for service learning. They got to go out and talk to real people. And so it's those kinds of soft skills, I think, that are essential. Creativity, it's there, and if you give it the opportunity, it will flourish. But they need those basic kinds of skills to understand the context of the problem they're trying to solve.
Thank you. So kind of same question in European situation.
Well, in the Europe, I can. The only thing I can do is just agree with what you said. That's first, totally. Perhaps I should skip this slide because
that's right.
then I have to repeat some of the issues. I only want to say is that what I find in the European industry and the industries in different countries, that they see it as a problem if regulations and standards are not transparent and not unambitious, and that they have problems to sell their products over the boundaries. Although in Europe we have one market, so you can export everything inside Europe without any requirements. But if you apply certain technology, it is awarded in a different way because of perhaps traditional issues or just habits or pressure groups that had something to say about the national regulations. That is a hinder, but some of the companies did overcome that, say, okay, this is a problem we have to solve, but if we can just add something to our product and it makes our product more attractive because it focuses not only on the environmental performance but also on the quality for wellness, for indoor environment, then you see that they are successful and they are really able to grow. And other companies who say, well, we see that one of the difficulties in applying new technology is that the people on the ground who has to apply it, the installers, the builders, they are not sufficient educated. They are working in this building construction sector, in the installing sector for 10, 20, 30 years, and we have to help them. So they, as companies, they build dissemination programs around their products with help, of course, with help of universities or other educators, but they do it on a non-for-profit basis. So it is an added value of their company. So they, and that's, I think, also one of the solutions where you could say that the system of educating the workers in our market is sometimes failing because continuous education, what we always say, doesn't work that way. So, and you see companies who do that, they also are successful. And then a third property of companies to be successful, to be active on a social, in the social structures of your profession. So be active in the national or regional associations of professionals, and be active in standard committees, national, but also in European level, and also try to communicate with your government, local government or central government, and the legislators. Try to explain. They need that. They need the information and they need the communication. I think, and if I look around in Europe, which companies are successful, they do all those three things. Mm-hmm. And I think that's important to come to develop your strategy.
As I was listening to both of you, first of all, I have a funny story about education. So my daughter is a millennial. Mm-hmm. She went to a school, in an architecture school, because she was heavily courted to be there, and got the standard program for the first semester and met with the dean, or the assistant dean of the architecture school about halfway through the semester and said, yes, but I want to plan for next year, and I'll be taking this engineering course and this calculus course. And the dean looked and said, no, you don't have time for that. It's all architecture for 5 years. So, and this is a young woman who has four advanced placement courses in calculus and physics, and so she became a mechanical engineer. And it's actually very convenient for me because she's an expert in battery technology, so anything I need to know, I can just call across the way to my own daughter. So the education system is changing, but it's not completely changed. There are still plenty of architects who have no idea how the building stands up, much less how it breathes. And we definitely need to change that. The thing that struck me, though, is we haven't mentioned one incredible influence over changing policies and regulations, and this is not just in the United States, but worldwide: insurance.
Mm-hmm.
The insurance companies see the long-term economic negative of not planning for this. And in the United States, they have been the strongest force for changing building codes so that they are more resilient. And it's because they can't afford for them not to be. And so we have much different resistance to hurricane force winds in the south because of Hurricane Andrew and then Hurricane Katrina. And it's been the insurance industry that has been able to very dispassionately say, this is the cost, and if you don't change the codes, this will be the cost to your community in either not being able to get insurance at all or in the increased premiums for that. And I think that that's an important and under-recognized influence for positive movement in this field.
That's a good comment. Actually, I was thinking about insurance as well yesterday too. I'm gonna take my moderator hat off and then put a panelist hat a little bit, and I want to just comment on this topic as well, because I am also experienced with education system in the United States, and I do quite a good amount of lectures when I come to Korea, and mostly at colleges and universities. And when I go there, and I usually talk to the professors and students and give them the insight that I got from the United States. And yes, it's right that the colleges and universities, they still kind of have their own curriculum and they don't want to look beyond that frame. But I see the change now in the United States. My company does this sustainable design, 100% of our projects all does. And we look for staff and we look for new employees who can actually speak those languages altogether. And we try to find colleges and universities, and not many universities have that kind of curriculum. So we always look at kind of a few colleges and universities that we can hire. So, Concordia in Canada, Texas A&M in Texas, they have this cross-disciplinary program. The architects actually have to learn energy modeling, and they have to understand those numbers in the energy modeling report, and vice versa. So, I'm running a small company, but I can represent the whole employer sector. As an employer, when I look for an employee, we look for those kind of students coming out of the school, and if your school doesn't have that kind of curriculum, then they are out of my picture. So again, I'm just challenging professors here, going back to your colleges and universities. If you want to increase your hiring rate for your students, then please just think about that kind of interdisciplinary programs. That's going to be impacting our market. That's going to be impacting our companies, and also it's going to impact the future of your colleges and universities. And also, I am involved in a small nonprofit in the United States as an advisor, which is called Be Now. The acronym B is BEE, Built Environment Education Now, and it's made out of 15 university professors around the country who are all architectural design professors. And what they saw was the need for changing this curriculum, exactly like we said, interdisciplinary and curriculum that can meet this sustainable movement. So they created this nonprofit, and they asked some practitioners from the industry to give our insight, for them, so they can actually change their curriculum. So they created this framework. It's called like a B rating system. So what they do is go to architectural schools and ask them all these kind of criteria questions. And by doing so, they can encourage the professors to think about changing their curriculum to meet the market needs. And so they are rating the School of Designs around the country, basically saying, hey, this school is much more equipped for this new market, and so that they are given A, and this school is given B, and they're going to publish it. And then, as we said, millennials and young students, when they go to colleges, they will look at those scores. And if your college is A and this college is B, and it's obvious which college they will choose. So this is the change that these professors are trying to make it, and I'm playing as an advisor role for that organization. So again, that's kind of change that I observe in the United States in the academic side that supports the market demand. So hopefully you can get that insight also as well. So changing the hat again. All right. So last question before we end this discussion today is for you, Katz. So kind of similar question, but I wanted to hear a little bit more kind of detailed example from your company, how you, actually we talked about climate change, but as I briefly talked, climate change is not only an environmental issue, but also I think it's a social equity issue as well. And the poor countries, the developing countries have more challenge as well. And the poverty, as I said, is also related very closely to the climate change. So doing the sustainable operation and business decision is not only for profit, but also for social responsibility. That's how I see it. So can you tell us a little bit more about your company's social responsibility business decisions and how it plays role in your business making profit?
Okay, would you please?
Yeah.
Yeah, this is a target. I talked about this. Mm-hmm. Next, please. This is the categories.
Yeah.
The 50, back to the extra. Yeah, 50%, 75%, and 75%, and 100%. This is the new categories, new definitions. Mm-hmm. And then from this, actually, I was a member of the the government, and from this, and I sold my idea to the top management by organizing related divisions like design, technology center, marketing, and sales, and I organized the project team to build Taisei ZEV, and I sold my idea to divisions, and then I went to the university and I got a very good professor, advice from him, and also I got a subsidy from Ministry of Environment, and then I sold the idea to the technical committee of Taisei Corporation, and then decided to go ahead, and he said, engineering people can do that. And then, next please. We completed net zero building at the Technology Center, the 2011, and 2014, and we used the technology like Kevin told, radiant heating, cooling, and natural ventilation, and Faircell. But Faircell gas is for consumption. And then the building is blocked by PV, because in our country there is not much land. So site is very limited, so that's the idea. And next please. This is the result. The left-hand side shows the consumption. Right-hand side shows the generation. We saved the energy down to 25%. And the rest of the 25% is covered by PVs. And next, please. This bar chart shows the simulation data and real data. The light color shows the simulation. The dark color shows the real data. The upper portion is the production, generation. The red part shows the consumption. and very precise our simulation was. And then, next please, we developed the simulation tool for ZEV project. The left-hand side shows the potential energy we can get at the site. It's a renewable energy. Sunlight for PV generation, and wind for natural ventilation. And right-hand side shows the building design, what kind of shape, insulation, and window area, glass areas, and mechanical, electrical system. We compare two things, and then evaluate possibility of ZEV. And next, please. So together with marketing division, we sell, not idea, we sell ZEV right now. And we got the 5 projects now under design. This is the story.
Good. All right. Well, actually, I liked this catchphrase. Yeah, and your company. So, yeah, for a lively world. Okay. Well, thank you very much. Well, I mean, this is very interesting, especially. And do you make this information actually available to the public so they can see what your company does?
Yes. We provide the annual report. This project is on the report.
Okay.
In the report.
Okay. All right. Well, I mean, a lot of 10 years ago, maybe it was more than 10 years ago, 12, 13 years ago, out of Fortune 500 companies, if you look at their annual report, I don't remember the exact number, but it was like less than 10% actually mentioned the sustainability in their annual report. And Forbes magazine looked at exact Fortune 500 companies like 3 years ago. Every company mentions sustainability in their annual report now. So that tells me, now if you want to do business these days, without addressing the sustainability, not only for the projects and income, but also just how you operate your business itself. If you do not do it in a sustainable way, you are out of this competition. So that's the indicator that I saw on this magazine, that all these 500 companies are now doing it. Construction companies, I occasionally look at construction companies' website or other architects' websites in the United States, of course, and many companies also now say they do sustainable design, they do sustainable construction, but a lot of times that's it. Yeah, that's it. So they just say it, but I cannot really find how they did it or how they're doing it. So again, if you are from the business sector here, I strongly encourage you to look at not only just pursuing the projects, but also how your business is run on a daily basis. If you can improve those sustainability and kind of present that to your potential clients, present that to your potential employees, then I bet you will have more clients and you will have better employees in the future. All right. Well, any comments on this? No? Go ahead.
Well, I can tell you that Virginia Tech graduates are definitely looking for companies that have corporate social responsibility stances and that are pursuing projects like this. That's who our students want to work for.
Yeah.
I think that this is exactly correct. Our standards for our expectations for what a company says are very different than even 10 years ago. Now you have to show me how you are doing these things. It has to show up on every place where you look on the website, not just the little section that you have a hard time finding about sustainability. You look to see lots of different factors. Are you publicly disclosing? What are you doing other than your main course of buildings? How are you contributing to the community in which you work? All of these things are discriminating for people who are looking for jobs. There are fewer people entering the workforce today than the number of people leaving the workforce, so it's shifting ever so slightly, even after the economic downturn, so that there's a knowledge labor shortage coming up, and people are recognizing that in the next decade or two, the search for talent is going to be the number one thing that companies will have to deal with. And those of us with 40 years aren't ready to leave yet, but it's going to happen sooner or later.
Yeah.
And it's going to be changed, and the generational shift is also huge. So that, and it's interesting that you have to speak different ways to different generations. It's extremely important, and if businesses don't understand that, they're going to be left behind as well.
Yes. All right. So we are kind of naturally getting into this closing remark thing, because I believe the way we said now is about to wrap up today's discussion. So let me give you just each of you 1 minute, if you can just share, what you can tell this audience, just as kind of highlight of what you wanted to say today. So anyone first? I don't want to just volunteer anyone. So you want to go? Okay.
I've got the mic. I'm happy
All
to
right.
go. Well, I heard a number of things that really stood out to me today, and systems thinking was one of them. But the thing that's most exciting to me as an educator is the idea that owners out there, that governments, that people who call for construction and design services are starting to recognize the creative potential of people in the design and construction industry to come up with outstanding solutions. So by removing constraints and focusing on the performance that you want your building to achieve, you actually liberate the kind of creativity that I think we all dream of when we go to school to get into this field. And I just think that's very exciting. I think I'll be very excited to take that home to my students as well. So, and my hope is that the way we are educating students helps to provide people to the workplace that can meet these new challenges.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Well, since she started, I'm going to come backwards. So.
Yeah, today I learned lots of things from all of you, and I think that the target, difficult target, is a kind of business chance, business opportunity for us to improve things. And I think that we should be prepared to pursue things by looking at not only architecture things, but also engineering things. So I think the students should be more flexible, not stick with only one area.
Mm-hmm.
I learned things from you today. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you. Yep.
Well, a closing remark. It's difficult. You are perhaps challenged to capture it in a few lines. That's not possible. Now, I just want to say, remember the first presentation of this of today. It is clearly said 40% we are responsible for of the energy used in our countries in average. So it is our obligation as a building industry to do something about that, to come up with solutions. And we have the knowledge, we have to apply them, we have to find, of course, financial roads to wonder about. And one of the financial experts in Europe said to me and to our engineers, you have to learn to speak with the financial world. You are not able to speak in terms they understand. So you have to learn a little bit about how to do that, and how to explain that it is in their interest to invest in your good plans, because it is in their interest. It is not only the community, but also the financial world can be easily convinced, but you have to find the correct words. So, and again, on the screen we saw a lot of new buildings, and of course we are still building and replacing buildings, but we also have to realize that in our world 95% is already there, and the renovation challenge is much higher. So find also smart solutions for deep renovation towards net zero energy buildings. That is possible, but it needs a little bit more creativity. But it also is a challenge for the industry to develop systems that you can use for big volumes of existing buildings. Think about that, because it could really be a big business. And the last thing I want to say, if we do not our work as a building industry, I'm sure as our government signed the agreement and the CO2 has to be reduced and the greenhouse gases, that they will perhaps choose other solutions, like greening, give more money to green our energy infrastructure. If it is what you want, okay, perhaps they cannot reach everything with it, but they can perhaps satisfy the requirements they signed for. So be aware of that. You have to be proactive as a building industry.
Thank you. Kevin, last but not least.
I think we have to remember, especially difficult since we're all in the building industry, that the buildings don't exist to be buildings. They exist for a purpose, and the purpose is the people who use the buildings. And if we don't think about that first and foremost all the way through every process, we miss the point. If we think about buildings from that standpoint, we focus not so much as we have done on eliminating toxins from the building, but thinking about how do we design the building to increase the health and well-being of the occupants in the building. And it can be done with the technology that we have today. And if we think about the buildings from that standpoint, we have to also learn that human behavior is part of what we must understand in the design, architectural, engineering, operations, maintenance, construction professions, all of that. And we're learning new things about human behavior all the time. So we spend a lot of time thinking about the impacts of behavioral economics on construction and design and building controls. Because if the building controls aren't set to accommodate the way people naturally are going to behave, people are endlessly creative and inventive at subverting the systems that you put in place. So it's important to think about that from that standpoint, and it also relates directly to climate change, because people talk about saving the planet. It's a lot easier to think about something a little bit more personal. Frankly, no matter what happens in climate change, the planet will be saved. The people on it might not be. So it is actually about us as human beings and people, and if we must keep that as the overarching focus for everything that we do.
Wow. Well, thank you very much for your really remarkable closing. And I'd like to open up to the questions to the audience, and we can receive some questions from them. But again, before